I'm Aleksandr Koloff from the Koloff Dynasty, and you are watching Drinking at Moe's.
All right, everybody, welcome to Drinkin' Moe's. Host Big Mo here. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment on YouTube. Helps with the pain in the butt algorithm. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, I said Anchor. But anyways, leave a review. Today I have with me Aleksandr Koloff. How are you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you doing today?
Can't complain. This is actually, as we're recording this, right before the holidays. And, it's actually my last one until next year. Classic little, oh, you're not doing that whole dad joke. But I actually got a pretty big month next month lined up. And, I've had some pretty good opportunities. So I'm doing pretty good.
Good deal.
But first thing I'd like to start off with each of my guests with is what got you started as a fan, and then what got you started, making the decision to make the jump into the business.
Okay. So as a fan, I used to watch Georgia Championship Wrestling and the NWA on TBS with my grandfather, 6:05 on Saturday nights. And there was a show that was hosted by a couple, Joe Pedicino and Bonnie Blackstone, that it ran through the rest of the night and everything till around 3-4 in the morning. So that was from the time I was like 7 or 8 years old, that was pretty well my every Saturday night was 6:05 with my grandfather. We'd watch the NWA, have a little break to eat dinner and get showered up and everything. And then you'd watch, I think it started at 8:00 and it'd run until usually I'd fall asleep in front of the TV watching wrestling. And then getting into wrestling, I'd been in Sambo and Jiu-Jitsu and box and was really always a professional wrestling fan, but didn't know of an avenue of how to get into it, and ran into a guy that I used to play ball with, another guy that had gotten into wrestling named Andy Anderson. And the pause was because I found out yesterday that his father passed away. So if he were to see that, I'd just send his condolences to him.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so like I ran into him and everything, and he asked me about it, and got into it, did a few things with him, and then sought out a trainer and got trained and just kept shooting for other opportunities from there.
That's awesome. And a lot of the same memories about Georgia Championship Wrestling. I was more like towards the tail end of that era, but even when they switched into when Turner bought it and, World Championship Wrestling came about, that 6:05 on Saturday nights, very sought after time for me, although there were times, growing up that I didn't get to necessarily watch it because I was born and raised Catholic, and Saturday nights was the time that my parents decided to go to church. So there were some times during.
Okay, so you guys went to Saturday night mass.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So there were some weeks that I didn't really get to watch it, but I definitely made a point to, at the very least, try to catch as much of it as I could. Right. Because, good Lord, some of the talent coming out of there, people still talking about people that were on that time slot.
Mm. Yeah. It was always, I think the thing that drew it to me was, and I'll never use the word fake. I hate that word, but like even whenever people would say, talk about that wrestling was predetermined or whatever, I would buy into that for WWF. but I never believed that about the NWA
Mm.
because you couldn't, they didn't maybe have the monster athletes, but they had the athletes that really got out there and worked. I mean, it was presented like a sport, and you
Yeah.
couldn't tell me that Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat or Nikita Koloff and Ric Flair weren't going for the top prize in the world, and those were the two best athletes in the ring at that time.
That is very true. That era of the NWA into early days of WCW, they did have those people that they had that grittiness, that intensity that, it would be hard to convince somebody that those guys weren't, really going out there. And, I do myself prefer the term predetermined because, like, I haven't done that much in-ring work. I mean, but I have taken a few bumps in the ring during some stuff for a local promotion, and good Lord, even taking a simple bump, after that night, I was walking funny for about a week.
Yeah, it feels like you've been in a bad car wreck.
Yep. So, yeah, no, like you, I don't like the term fake because, predetermined, yeah, but the damage you guys take in that ring, even on simple falls, every now and then you never know if something you do very routine, could make a wrong step and then boom, you're blowing out a shoulder or something.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've racked up more injuries in a sport that people will talk about being quote unquote fake than I ever did in all the ones I played that were, as straight up and legit as you could get to,
Oh, no, I can only imagine. I know I've become quite good friends with a bunch of the wrestlers and the other people in the business here in Omaha. And when I was stationed in the Navy down in San Diego, I'm still good friends with some of the wrestlers down there. And yeah, I've heard of some of the stories of some of the injuries they've had. I've witnessed some just myself with, they actually had to cart the guy off to an ambulance because of a wrong placement on a high crossbody, like landed too high up and then just wrenched his neck wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a laundry list of things that are either torn out of place, been broken. That's a mess. Thank you for your service, by the way, too, before we get too far past that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Somebody had to do the job, and I was honored to be able to do it.
Well, thank you.
Well, we talked a little bit about Georgia Championship Wrestling and down south, being in that area. Correct me if I'm wrong, looking up on Facebook in the Georgia area, that there is a pretty good legacy of, wrestling down there, going from Georgia Championship Wrestling to, even just in the Southeast in general, down to Florida and how Dusty Rhodes did all his work down there. What's it kind of like, working down there now and, kind of the legacy going from those historic promotions and historic wrestlers that work down there?
It's Georgia, really, it just in the past, I'd say for sure the past 10 years, definitely the last 5 to 6 has really evolved a lot to where there's it's a great mix of crowds and styles and everything. You still have kind of what people term more as the Southern wrestling kind of show where there's some entertainment, but they still want to see the athleticism and everything.
Yeah.
All the way to that there's more of a kind of they want to see that storytelling and everything within
Mm,
the confines of a match. But then
yeah.
there's also a lot of shows now also that are more what I would equate to kind of like a northern style, where the the spots and everything,
Mm,
the higher flying and everything, that's more of what some of those crowds, and that's really more kind of centralized towards Atlanta.
yeah.
Though, but then the further south you get, there's more of what you would think of as the kind of the traditional Southern wrestling and everything. Um, Florida is a lot like that. There's a good mix with that also. There's a company here that's picked up the Continental brand,
Mm,
and they do shows from Alabama over to Georgia, and they're always fun because they're a crowd that and as a show they put on a good mix. I always say it's like going to the circus. They've got the
mm,
lions, tigers, and the bears. They do a good job of putting on the heavyweight guys where you're not going to see a lot of up down kind of
mm,
movement and everything, but you'll just see some good hard hitting kind of things,
yeah.
and you'll see some good athletic matches. They've Continentals use some really good female talent, to good tag team, just anyway, just a good all around blend.
Oh yeah. No, those are kind of the promotions that I kind of gravitate to. They have a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
You you get the solid female talent out there, which, I mean, there is a good deal of it out there. I mean, just look at, right now off the top of my head, because I was just re-seeing the post about it. Stupid cat. But anyways, Billy Starks and how she, at
Mm-hmm.
such a young age, just turning 18, going and doing a tour over in Japan, and now she's, you know, making her AEW Dark debut, and it, somebody at such a young age already having that experience and that talent, and then you go and you have the heavyweights, you have the hoss fights, like I said, to kind of round it off, a little bit of everything for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, everybody has something to like.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, like myself, I like the matches we had talked about. Like I'm more drawn into guys that can get out and tell a good story within the match and make things make sense. Where
Mm,
I mean, I'll kind of tune out myself if I'm watching something. I'll tune out if it looks like it's just a bunch of, irregardless of how athletic it is, if it's just a lot of spots strung
yeah,
together, but they're not telling a story, or they're not,
yeah.
not really registering and selling, and
Oh yeah.
they lose me quick on those types of matches.
Oh, I can see that. I know myself, kind of like you, when it's just, spot after spot after spot, it's like, okay. But when, you can fit those spots in the confines of telling the story and, making it make
Mm-hmm.
sense, then it's like, oh, okay. You get the excitement in there, but you're telling the story throughout it.
Yeah, it's like a good movie. I mean, you don't watch an action movie, and it's got a little slow start where they introduce you to the good guy, they introduce you to the bad guy, a little bit of back and forth happens, and then
Yeah.
you get into a big explosion or a big event, then it simmers down, and you know what I mean, until you go to
Yeah.
the climax at the finish. I mean, if you sat in your seat in a movie theater and they started blowing up cars for an hour and a half and then you were done, I mean, you're exhausted. You can't even keep up with what's going on. It's too much of a mind overload. And that's where I feel sometimes like I've turned into the grumpy old guy, because like I'll watch this and I'm like, man, some of these guys are more athletic, on that day than I've ever been on the best day of my life. If they just slow down and let some things breathe,
Mm,
give the audience a chance to appreciate what they did, work into that next thing. And especially, I mean, whenever they go out there, and I mean, they could do a 3 to 4 month program in the amount of time if they save some of those things rather than doing it all in one night, one 20-minute match, they could have had, 4 or 5 if they'd have slowed down and told the story.
Oh yeah. And, you we talked about those guys that, always doing spot after spot. And, when you're constantly doing that show after show after show repeatedly, those guys they have the, they call the high risk moves, and have a shorter career because, that's why they call them high risk moves. Something goes wrong that one time and then they tear an ACL, they blow out shoulder, they, break something in their neck, who knows?
Well, that's what, whenever we had the wrestling school here in Jenkinsburg, Georgia, that was one of the first talks we had with everyone was talking about your bump card. And that's basically, if the day you were born, God put all the money you're ever going to have into a bank account. You can do some things to save your money, but you can't make deposits. And every time you take a bump, the bigger the withdrawal. And sooner or later, you're out of money. And try to make guys understand that. Like, it's awesome that they can do that. But, maybe every night's not the night to pull that out. Judge where you are, judge your crowd.
Yeah.
And is it really going to further you to pull that big high risk spot out at that moment?
Oh yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Another thing I was wanting to talk to you about is we talked about the legacy of the Southeast and, going Georgia Championship Wrestling, Dusty's work in Florida. The name Koloff has a big legacy with it. What's it like kind of being, from that perspective, the Koloff name and, you got Nikita, Ivan, the Koloffs from Georgia Championship Wrestling and work they've did other places.
It's huge. I mean, it's something I take very seriously. It's the reason that, I'm constantly training, trying to stay in shape to look the part. Just because it is. I mean, it's an honor. First, it was a big honor just whenever the opportunity was ever approached to be allowed to carry that legacy and to carry that name. Because, there was a Dan Koloff prior to there being Ivan Koloff, then Nikita Koloff. So, I mean, it dates all the way back to the early 1900s. And each one of those men carried a lot of weight on their shoulders. And for us to get to do that, to be mindful, and it's a lot more than just in the ring, to be mindful on social media whenever you're out in public in front of a crowd during the matches, to put out, really to always have the best performance I can possibly have to carry that for them. And I mean, the fact that, Nikita, became for real, like a real life, he is a real life mentor, like an uncle to me now. It's a friendship that I value, put a lot of value on. I'll forever be thankful for it. Prior to being given the name, to get to speak with Ivan's widow whenever Miss Renee talked to me and questioned me and everything on it, and to make sure that it was a person that took that seriously and would honor her husband's name. It's huge, and being a fan of theirs, as growing up and everything, that made it pretty cool too. And to look over in the corner, and there's been moments in matches where Nikita's ringside, and to get to roll out during a match and let things slow down a touch, and sometimes it hits me during the match and everything, but there's moments where he's real life coaching too. He's do this would be better, that was good, but do this instead. And I mean, the 8-year-old in me's mind's blown whenever those kind of moments happen, to roll out and you've got Nikita Koloff there ringside coaching.
Oh man, I can only imagine, being able to sit under the learning tree of a guy that has had the history that he had, and carrying on that name, it's got to be an amazing experience.
It is. It's been a blessing. It's been huge.
So I can imagine. We talked a little bit about some of the wrestling that kind of, for the lack of a better term, spot fest. Do you pay attention to a lot of the current product? The WWE, there's AEW, but countless promotions on things like Fight or IEW TV. How are you able with keeping up with a lot of the new current product?
Not as much as I used to. I've still paid more attention to WWE since they've had their changes that have gone on, and then having some friends that are up there now, particularly watch them just because you want to see your friends do well, and to see how they're doing and everything, and to pull for them, and happy and grateful for the opportunities they're getting. And then AEW, there's guys there that I really enjoy watching. I think that the Ring of Honor blend is cool. I've got some friends that have recently gotten some opportunities there now that Ring of Honor is a part of it. Huge fan of FTR. I think
one of my absolute favorites right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're such a throwback tag team. They're one of the best teams that has come along in years.
Oh yeah, their trilogy they've had with the Briscoes, going back to those Ring of Honor shows. Like, if you talk about tag team matches of the year, those three have got to be on that trilogy has got to be on that list.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I haven't got to watch those yet, but I've heard and seen highlights of them and everything. And I mean, that's the thing that I love about those guys so much is they can get out and they can go with the guys that you would think of as being more spotty, but then you could pick FTR up and put them back in the, like what we've been talking about with the NWA in the 80s, and they would have fit right in. And I wish that I haven't retweeted it just because I guess just laziness, but like years ago, whenever they were first getting into NXT, I swear I was sitting there watching it, and I just tweeted something about how much they reminded me of Arn and Tully. And I caught a bunch of grief about that it was way too early for that, this and that. And, now you fast forward however many years, and they're being managed by Tully Blanchard, compared exactly to those two guys, or were being managed by Tully. I mean, it's amazing.
Oh yeah, even back to the NXT days for those guys, they definitely had that old school feeling to them. Yeah, I can totally see that. I know a couple people that I've actually interviewed for the podcast in the past. We talked a little bit about Billy Starks last night on Raw. Was then Jonah, but Bronson Reed being back there, making his return last night. I mean, I got to talk to him for the podcast in St. Louis. And when I finally realized it was him, I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome.
So he was on Raw?
Yeah.
Because he had got caught up in the releases, then went to Impact, and now he's back.
Yeah, he went to Impact and then did work in Japan with New Japan, actually had quite a deal of success there, even having a victory over Okada.
Oh, wow.
And made his return just last night.
Oh, cool. Good for him. That's good.
Oh yeah. I'm excited. He's been a favorite of mine, clear from, having the run with the NXT North American Championship, and heck, his match, talking about Impact, his match with, his matches with PCO and one of my personal favorites from over in Japan right now, Tomohiro Ishii, getting to see those matches. I remember telling him that the show he had on Impact, that the match with Ishii happened, I believe it was a pay-per-view. And I'm like, I told him, I ordered that show strictly off of your match with Ishii.
That's cool.
But yeah, I kind of I have gravitated more towards AEW, but I will admit that, some of the changes since Triple H has taken over a lot of the creative for WWE has made WWE kind of slip back into my routine vision of wrestling, because I'll admit there were times in the last couple of years I'm like, I'd try watching and then I'd turn it to something else partway through, just for, individual tastes. Everybody has their own taste for what they like, what they don't. But a lot of the stuff, it's become, I don't want to seem negative, but it's become a little more watchable for me.
I could see that. I mean, there was times that it was never I think the athleticism of the athletes in both promotions right now are at a point that like they've never been at any other time. But it was some of the scripted promos and things like that is where I get lost. Because I mean, all of those guys, if they're, and just speaking for myself, I mean, I think if I were in that situation, I'd want to be given an opportunity to be more like myself, turn the volume up. And if it works, that's great. And if it doesn't, I mean, cut me loose. But I mean, I wouldn't want to be in that. I wouldn't want to be in that spot where you're having to try to force something, and then the people watching the product and maybe even the people that are producing it blame it on the athlete whenever they're having to try to kind of force feed something that they don't truly feel.
Yeah. And the characters that seem to, I mean, as far as resonating with me, when I've talked to a few people and finding out that's how they do it, are the ones that, their in-ring persona is that extension of themselves. And, it's not so much of, oh, I'm having to read off this sheet, which, I mean, you get into WWE, and I've heard less of it with AEW, but, having the team of writers, and that's fine. You got a job, you got to do what you got to do. But, when those ones that have that little bit more of a freedom to, let that true side of themselves out, those are the ones that, at least as far as me and a lot of people I know, seem to resonate a lot better with us.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that, I think the thing that, and I've heard people say about Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns that they didn't like so much, that they're not on TV, that they, you don't see them as much on. But I mean, to me, that's what makes them special. Like, you didn't see Ric Flair wrestle on, every once in a while you would see him wrestle just on a regular thing. But I mean, for the most part, that was a big deal when you got to see the world champion on there. And I mean, I really like what they're doing with the bloodline and how they've kept Lesnar special. And I mean, those guys are special. They're not run-of-the-mill athletes. So make them special. Let them be special.
Oh, yeah. And, there is something to be said about having those people that, they aren't there wrestling every single week, keeping that as, I think MJF used it in a promo recently, billing himself as kind of a special attraction. You get those people that, you don't get to see them all that often. So when you do, it's like, ooh, I got to turn into this because I think I'm going to get something special.
Yeah. And I mean, that guy, he's probably got to be the best heel and the one true heel that's come along in a long time.
Oh yeah. That is one thing I'll say about a lot of the current product is there isn't so much of that old school heel that like they didn't care about getting cheered. They wanted to do whatever they could to make you absolutely hate their guts and basically pay your hard-earned money to want to see them get their butt kicked. And MJF is every bit of that.
Mm-hmm. That's the weird thing about wrestling. I guess it's because of, whenever you get so many sponsors and there's a lot of money involved with that. I mean, a lot of them have to toe the line to a certain extent, but I mean, you wouldn't, name whatever guys played so many villains and everything in movies and an actor. But I mean, people don't see that guy and get hot at him about something he did in a movie. So, I mean, they shouldn't get mad at.
No, I'm with you there. So I have two categories that I use to kind of round off the show. One's a bit of a name game. I name off some people. I try to tailor it to each guest. The other is, I used to call it a speed round, but it never went that dang quick. So I just changed the name to a random question round. I just throw some questions in a hat and boom, there we go. The only one that I always use is the very first one. But name game. We talked a little bit about legacy of, Georgia, Southeast. So I figured I'm going to name off some legends of the Southeast. You give me your thoughts on them.
Okay.
First one, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
He was one of the first characters that I really loved watching as a kid and everything. Dusty just had a charisma that was larger than life. He was, it was like he said, I mean, he was in there with guys like Nikita and Lex and the Road Warriors and the Steiners, and he didn't fit the mold of those guys and everything, but his charisma and the way he would move, the way he would sell and everything, you just loved the guy. And I mean, some of the memories of him and Nikita, and whenever the Road Warriors took the spike off their shoulder pads and dug in his eye and everything. I mean, your heart cracked for Dusty every time he was out there and things like that were going on.
Oh, totally. I bringing up Road Warriors, those were two of my absolute favorites. Like, and still are, God rest their souls, but the whole look they had, the spiked shoulder pads,
they were really cool.
That, the music they had, down in Georgia Championship Wrestling to when they get to WWE and that, oh, what a rush. I got to see them at the Monday Night Raw taping here in Omaha once. And man, other than maybe Stone Cold, the one time I got to actually see him live, I've never had anybody get me from the moment the music started to the moment they go step back through the curtain. I'm on my feet the whole damn time.
Yeah.
Road Warriors were definitely one of those for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next, the icon Sting.
Oh yeah. So I first remember watching him in UWF whenever he was with Eddie Gilbert and Rick Steiner. I can't remember what the faction was called. And then seeing him, come up through the NWA and WCW and everything. I mean, my personal favorite will always be, Surfer Sting with the blonde hair and the crazy colored tights and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And he was awesome. His matches with Ric Flair. I mean, I remember him winning the world title at the Great American Bash where he had the red, white, and blue face paint on and everything, and being so excited as a kid for that. And, he was really cool.
Next one, We kind of talked about him and Sting, but Ric Flair.
Oh, the man. I mean, like, that's I've joked with Nikita that, before I'm done, I'm gonna come to the ring in a Flair robe with our, red and yellow colors or something. I gotta do it once. I mean, Flair was, I can remember, like, even whenever I was a little kid watching it, with my grandfather, and my grandfather hated Ric Flair. I mean, just wanted to see his head put in the third row every single time he was out there. And I can remember being kind of torn because, I think, I don't know, man, this guy's kind of cool, but then there'd be times where I couldn't stand him, and he just some of the matches that he had and everything, and it wasn't until listening to him talk on some of his things to realize that it wasn't whenever he was the traveling champion, it wasn't the Omni 7 days a week. Sometimes even as the world champion, he would be in a car lot somewhere and everything, and having to carry that top local guys promote, that local promotion's top guy, and make him look like he was within an inch of beating the world champion. And he just, he was it for me.
Oh yeah. And we talked about the way he did that. And another thing that, there's been a couple guys like this, but I've always considered some of the absolute greatest to be those that they can play the heel and get you to hate them, but whenever they're actually a face, they can get you to love them just as much. And personally, feel Ric Flair was definitely one of those. He could get you to absolutely hate him, but then, he gets those face runs and you can be like, damn, that guy's cool. I like it.
And that goes back to the storytelling. I mean, and in saying this, I am in no way, shape, or form comparing myself to Ric Flair.
Yeah.
But I worked for a show for several years in Georgia that, they were consistently drawing good crowds for an independent promotion. And they got to do an Iron Man match with Jimmy Rave on July 4th. And I want to say it was either 2015 or 2016. And walking in as the heel, I mean, there were literally people in this town in Georgia, Carrollton, Georgia, that were telling me they hoped I died. They hoped Jimmy Rave killed me. And I mean, like, meant it. It wasn't a nod, ha, wink, wink kind of thing. I mean, these people were serious.
Oh, yeah.
So we go 60 minutes. Jimmy beats me, gets the last fall with, I think there was 3 seconds left in the match. And so, like, right then and there, though, everybody, the whole locker room emptied out, and they were, clapping for us and everything, because it's really one of the coolest things I've gotten to be a part of, because we held the crowd's interest from bell to bell. And, for 60 minutes in a world where that doesn't happen too often anymore is a lot. And so anyway, the guy who's the booker, he comes out and he says, we're gonna flip you right here. Or he goes, we're gonna flip your face. And I said, right now? And he said, yeah, it's right. And I said, all right. So I turn around, and the guy that's managing me, I said, hey, we're gonna make a turn here. You slap me. And I mean, he was awesome too. As a guy named Al Getz. And he slaps me, and as soon as he slaps me, I registered, came back, pop him. He takes the best flat back dead fish bump it ever, and took the bottle of water, poured it on him and everything. And the same guy, I'll never forget this, the same guy that wished me dead on the way in was crying and hugged me on the way out and telling me how he knew I was never that bad of a person and all this kind of stuff. And it was cool, just how like you say with Flair, how he was able to do that. But then it's because of the storytelling and the things that he put together.
Totally. Last but not least, for the name game, a guy very synonymous with Ric Flair, Arn Anderson.
Oh, the guy that did not get the world title he should have got.
Oh, totally agree with you.
I mean, he is. Don't do that, please. He, I mean, Arn, for as much credit as Flair gets for what he was in the Horseman, Arn was the workhorse.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if there's a bad Arn Anderson match floating around out there, I've never seen it. I mean, from the way he talked to his intensity, the way he was in the ring and everything, just the deliverance. I mean, it was just everything about him is awesome. I've ripped off so much of his stuff. It's not funny.
You know, that is very just judging from, you know, the intensity that he showed. And good Lord, there's a reason, you know, you said he definitely the workhorse of the Full Horseman. There's a reason they called him the Enforcer. He just had that grittiness and that just he'd knock your damn teeth down your throat. Loved it. Next, going into the random question round, this is the one that I always like to lead off with because it leads into some crazy stories that I love hearing. Craziest in-match moment.
Craziest in-match moment. Usually the craziest things I think of are involving fans. I had an older gentleman one night decide that I made him mad because he was getting riled up, and there's a backstory to this too. And I clutched my chest like I was going to have I told him I'd give him a one-hitter quitter, and clutched my chest and everything. And the guy got really hot, and he took a swing at me with his oxygen bottle. And so like then I got him riled up further, and I was like, you need that to live. You hate me so much that you'll take a swing at the only thing keeping you alive to try to get one poke at me. Well, it turned out the guy got so mad because almost a year to the day in nearly the same seat, he had a heart attack at that show, and I wasn't aware of it.
Oh,
so, I mean, he had a legitimate reason to be mad. And then there was another older man at a show that he always carried one of those canes that had like the brass duck head on the end of it. And I had told him in the ring, he popped up and, you know, he called me a colorful name for chicken manure. And I told him, he might have whipped my butt one day, but it wasn't 2 days. And this wasn't WW2. I'll come out there to snap him in half. And said it, got him riled up, went on about, you know, what all we were doing and everything. And his daughter really and truly saved me because I heard Daddy no. And I had enough time when I lost track of where I was at and was mouthing off at somebody else. And that taught me a lesson that day to keep aware of where my back was to a crowd. So I grabbed the back of my head, ducked, and went forward. And he had turned that cane to where the duck head was facing at my head. And he brought it up like the swinging axe and was coming down at my head. And his daughter jumped in and caught it.
Ooh.
And then I guess in the last year, and I've run this one, I really, you know, I'm all for guns, have guns, everything else. Just think they shouldn't be at events where you're paying me to make people mad. Yeah. This, you know, younger, late teens to early 20s girl was giving me a hard time. So I stuck my head out and popped my mouth off at her. And then this, you know, big guy that I assumed to be her father went and stand up. So I get to mouthing with him. And then, like, I look at his side and the guy's got a gun. He's got a pistol.
Oh.
And I'm like, I went, is that a gun? Like, I just stopped. It froze me. I said, is that a gun? And he's like, yeah, it's a gun. And so, like, I had totally forgotten about the match by now. I'm just locked in on this guy. So the guy that I'm wrestling with, he walks up and like I've lost it. I totally broke character and everything. He walks up and he slaps me in the rear end and everything. And I turned around and I went, knock it off, John. This guy's got a gun, you know, like pointing. And and then And then 2 years ago, having a guy pull a knife on me,
Ooh.
which was, I mean, I guess, you're doing a good job when people get that involved.
I would say so. Playing the
it,
heel and you're getting somebody worked up to that point. Yeah, you're
yeah.
definitely doing your job.
Yeah. And then the security were like, oh, we're going to throw him out. And I was like, don't throw him out. Like, I mean, help watch my back, but don't throw him out. I mean, if anything, you guys owe me more money and he'll bring some friends and we'll have more fun next time. It's a warped way of looking at someone pulling a knife on you, but I mean,
yeah, no, that is true. Next one, favorite food.
oof, man, you better. I hope you packed a lunch for this one. It'd be a combination between sushi and barbecue. Like really, really and truly, that's just a straight up coin toss between the two. If it's really good barbecue, I love it. And then sushi, I could eat every single meal.
Oh yeah, I didn't really get too much into sushi. I had it before I met my wife, but there's this spot that's like not too far away from our house right now that we'll go over there for happy hour. And I definitely have my favorite rolls, but yeah, no, barbecue. There's some places I remember, one in particular that I've been to when I was down in Mississippi, because most of my first year in the Navy was spent down Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, that part. And we went to this place a couple times, but I want to say the Shed down by Pascagoula, Mississippi.
Sounds like a good barbecue restaurant name.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I remember first time I went up there, and it was not too far away from the water, but there was this group of trees right behind it. And I swear I was thinking a gator was going to be coming out from the trees.
I know Mississippi, there's a good chance.
But you see a lot of barbecue places, they'll talk about fall off the bone ribs. You pick up the bone, the meat will just fall off. That place was the only barbecue place I've ever been to where it literally did that.
Oh, wow.
Where I literally had to eat the ribs with a knife and fork because, you pick up the bone and the meat just plopped off.
That's awesome.
Oh, man, I loved it. Next question. Favorite movie?
Oof. It's a toss-up. Because, I mean, it's a toss-up between either Gladiator, any of the Star Wars movies of the saga, except for Episode 1, and any of the Rockies, except for Rocky 5.
Okay. No, all classics. Can't argue with you there. I was a big fan of the Star Wars movies. I didn't hate Episode 1 as much as some people do, but
it served a purpose.
Yeah. And with the whole saga going from the original 3 to the prequels to the ones after Disney took over, I just enjoyed watching how the story unfolded and how it met up with the original 3.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was cool. I liked all of those. The original 6 are, my favorite, though, but I didn't hate the next ones. Of the newer ones, I think Episode 3, where you get to see Vader, become Vader, was my favorite.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just gonna say also with Rogue One, I thought that was a decent tie-in. How it went from how between episode 3 and the first Star Wars movie, how it kind of bridged the story in between those two, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying the spinoff shows and everything that Disney's doing. Like I liked, I really liked Boba Fett, where I heard, you know, some of the people did our Bounty Hunter or whatever it was they called, Book of Fett, I think.
Yeah.
I liked The Mandalorian was awesome. I thought that one was great. I wish they would do more like Knights of the Old Republic kind of stuff.
That would be interesting. That would definitely be interesting. Last but not least, for the random question round, the only other one I like to use every time, but I like to use it at the end. Best advice for anybody wanting to get into wrestling.
The biggest thing is to find a good trainer, not just a and I'm hesitant to say somebody that's got a big resume, like that's been into the bigger promotions, not because they couldn't and everything, but I mean, you can find some people that are really talented that just maybe didn't make it to that point.
Yeah.
But to find a trainer that really knows what's going on, that can teach you the basics and everything, and then to seek out more people later that can, you know, kind of do the polishing.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the things I felt really fortunate with. The first trainer I had, he was always right on the cusp of getting into some of the bigger shows. And I mean, he's super talented. He had an injury bug that it seemed like right there whenever he was knocking on the door, an injury would bite him, and it seemed to come around those times. But then I was, you know, really fortunate to have guys around that had been in the bigger shows and had been there for a long time with the large promotions. And I got to have them whenever I had that good foundation there to polish the rough edges and to really show that. So, I mean, that would be the first thing, to get a good reputable trainer, someone that's not just, because there's a lot of people out there just out to take your money.
Yeah.
And then, even though you'll find that for the most part, a lot of the promotions, independent promotions, are going to be the same for the most part. For people to get out and get their name built more, you know, than just their home area. So where they, you know, perception's reality. If people are seen in more areas and they're perceived to be more in demand, you get to see different crowds. What something that works in Georgia may not work in Nebraska, that may not work in Texas or wherever else, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. Invest in good gear. Because you could be the most talented person in the world, but if, you know, you come out and your gear doesn't look right or whatever else, a lot of people are going to write them off right then and there. And then to treat them, don't look at themselves just as and this is the thing where a lot of the people coming in are really good at now. Don't just look at themselves as they want to get into wrestling, market themselves as a brand, and to always be conscious of how you're presenting your brand, what you're putting onto your social media, how you're conducting yourself. You don't want to turn, you know, one part of your audience against you, or, you know what I mean, to try to be favorable to a lot of different crowds.
Oh yeah, no, definitely gotta, you know, like you said, the more people get their eyes on you and you get more well-rounded, the more places you travel to, because, you know, like you said, something that might work one area might not work in another, but then you get that experience, you get that well-roundedness that, you know, who knows, maybe one of those times you're in one of those areas and you get that well-roundedness, a scout from a big promotion might get their eyes on you and like, he seems like a well-rounded wrestler. We want to, you know, bring him in for a tryout or offer him a contract even. Definitely agree. Well, that is about all I have for tonight. I want to first take the time to thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh,
And
thank you for having me.
where can people find you social media wise, to get their eyes on you if they don't already have them there?
Everything is, Instagram is at Aleksandr Koloff. It's spelled Aleksandr. Then obviously Koloff. At Aleksandr Koloff on Instagram, at Aleksandr Koloff on Twitter, Aleksandr Koloff on Facebook. That'd be the three main areas to find me.
Definitely, and we'll be providing those in the description. But like I said, thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and best of luck in future shows and everything.
Thank you. I appreciate it.